Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. Today, we are going to be talking about one of the most important relationships that you're going to have in your entire life, from birth to death, probably, arguably, the single most important relationship you'll ever make. And that is the relationship with yourself. That's right. Big trick question there, and how you're going to, make a relationship with you, not with others. Angela, why is this so important to you? Why does this matter?
The list is long. Number one, can I just say I love having podcasts because then when I've written things in my book that I'm like, oh, and I have even more to say about that. So it's very fun to get to expound on this. It's great for me to get to continue to learn more. But over the Christmas holidays, I had a chance to dive into the book, The Good Life. And it is so interesting to me because Harvard started a study on well-being back in 1938. And it's important for a couple of things. Number one, up until that time, psychological research had only focused on disorders and what is wrong with people. Think about Freud, think about those guys. They were all about, I don't know who else, young, maybe, I guess you could argue. But anyway, all the actual research studies were on things that were wrong with people. And this is the very first study that was talking about well-being. And it actually started as two different studies, which is very cool to me because they first chose a group of men who were at Harvard that were like the cream of the crop. So they were, great families. Well, they had made it to Harvard. I think that was the criteria. Most of them were good looking. They were all set up for success. John F. Kennedy was actually in the original study. And these guys agreed to be interviewed, and essentially for a long time. I don't remember how long it started at the beginning, but the second study was another group at Harvard that decided to study inner city boys in Boston that came from really terrible backgrounds, but were thriving at the age of 13, 14. So in their backgrounds, they should have been in juvenile detention and they weren't. So they wanted to study them. And so after the first few years, these two studies merged so that we ended up with this group. I think it started with about 800 people, white males mostly. So they talk about this in the study. It continues to this day. That's the thing, is that number one, it was the first study on well-being. Number two, it is the longest study that has ever been conducted on well-being. It continued to follow those people through the history. It has like over an 80% retention rate, which is unheard of for a long-term study, a longitudinal study. And in addition to studying those original guys, then they also studied their children. And I think they're even getting to the point where they're about to start grandchildren. So you have these multiple generations, and it's a deal where they study the people and then ask them questions every other year. And then like every 5 or 10 years, 5 years, they go in and they do all of these, like an MRI, they did heart tests, they did stress tests, so it wasn't just what am I self-reporting, but they literally will study this. And all of the participants have agreed. I think the participants have also agreed to donate their body to science when they're done. Anyway, crazy to me, crazy. So, okay. So love this book. The Good Life.
So hold on. You took a deep dive into the research is super fun, but what's the point of it again?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to set it up. Because what they found is they wanted to see, what does it take to be successful? What does it take to have a good life? Number one takeaway, relationships. And I propose, which we're going to talk about in the second part of this series on relationships, your relationships with others is in direct correlation with your relationship with yourself. So by starting with yourself, then you will, by nature, improve your relationships with others. And since that's what it takes to have a good life, that's why we're going to talk about it.
I feel like I'm just going to come out swinging. It's 2024. We're not holding back. that doesn't seem to track for me. What do you mean? Like,
Mm.
I mean, I'll be honest. I there's two parts of me. There's the gut check response, and then there's the part that's like, well, actually, I do understand this. The gut check response, though, is like, there's no way that I mean, I don't know, just like, sure, investing in the relationship in myself will improve the relationship with others. If I'm in a spot where I've got a like really crappy relationship with myself, I don't know, feels far-fetched and feels like a lot. Like feels like it'd be easier to work on behaviors and actions and make a checklist of the number of times that I reach out to friends and do that so often. I also acknowledge and want to draw the line and connect the dot for anybody else who might be listening. That is really likely coming from the perfectionist part of my brain that says this is how we do things. And we make a list and we achieve it. And that's how we do friendships and relationships. And bing,
So
bang, boom. That's it.
I just want to be an active listener right now. So what I heard you saying is that you are calling BS on my
Yeah.
hypothesis.
Yeah. Part of me. I want to acknowledge, you know me.
No. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay. Well, because I think it's exciting
Because conflict breeds drama. Ooh.
no, because then anybody else that is like listening, if they listen through my obnoxious description of the Harvard study, then they might be like, they may be calling BS too. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for being the voice for people.
Hey, what was it? I'm carrying Josh's torch. I'll be the everyman that says BS. There's no way that, and I think that there is a part of it though that is different than how we are taught. It's different than how culture acts. It's different than just the natural, what's currently very common about how to build relationships with other people and how to maintain well-being. It does not, to start with yourself is selfish. To think about yourself too much is you're putting the focus in the wrong place. Sure, put your oxygen mask on first and then your child's, but that means like make sure that I'm not literally drowning and then go save somebody else. I think that this is actually pretty common within culture for people to feel this way.
Yeah.
And yet, here we are, gonna tell you to live a freaking awesome life, we might have to do things different than culture.
100%. So the whole purpose of my life is for people to have freedom. I would say if you ask me what is my mission in life, it is to help encourage people to have freedom, whether that is psychological freedom, financial freedom, physical freedom, like freedom. I'm all about it. So I pretty much don't do anything cultural acceptance. I try not to, but I do understand what you're saying. Like we do have to fight upstream of the culture to a degree. So let me explain it to explain it to my hypothesis. We have to go back to beliefs.
First, can you restate your hypothesis just one more time for me?
My hypothesis is that to have great relationships with others, you have to start with a great relationship with yourself.
Okay.
There is a correlation. I think the way I said it was there's a correlation between the relationship you have with yourself and the relationship you have with others.
Okay.
So
to unpack
if you have a good relationship with yourself, it is likely that you will have a better likelihood that you will have a good relationship with others, like in general, if you have a bad relationship with yourself. But to go ahead.
Oh, so I was like, so to go upstream to expound upon the hypothesis.
Yep.
Lay out the background.
We got to start with the underlying belief of how I see the world. Sorry, I used a pun to line up my hypothesis. Sorry. You
got to give us more so that we all can understand the pun, because keep going so we all can get in on the joke. Keep going.
So the beliefs that you have shape how you see the world. It literally forms your worldview. So the beliefs that you have about yourself will shape how you see the world and how you hear the world. Probably how you feel the world, but we're just going to focus on those two. Specifically, I will say to you that if you have negative beliefs, it is similar to having sunglasses that are all scratched up and cracked, and you can't see through them properly. It is like having headphones in that are tuned to a radio station that you are losing driving down the mountain. Like it is staticky and it is hard. I'll give you an example. If you believe that you are not lovable, I don't care how much time someone else tells you they love you, that you're lovable. There is a part of you that will never believe them 100%. You may say in your brain, oh, I know, my brain tells me that makes sense. I'm lovable, but you're not going to feel it because inherently you don't feel lovable. If you correct that belief that you are lovable and you begin to love yourself, then when someone else loves you, it makes sense. It checks. The gut check checks out. You're not going to consider them, you're not going to call BS on them because you are going to have already believed that about yourself. In the same way, if you believe you're lovable and someone offers you the message that you are not lovable, then you're going to recognize, oh, that person isn't safe. That person, what's going on with them? That's super weird. Now, does that mean that never, ever, 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 ever am I going to assume ill intent about somebody? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about this 100%, 0% of the time, but it will be so much easier and it will make so much more sense to you that, oh, yes, of course I'm lovable. So, of course, people are going to give me the message. Additionally, we have a reticular activating system that wants you to be right. And so if you believe I'm not lovable, you actually are going to be more apt to even see evidence that proves you're not lovable, versus if you believe you're lovable, then your reticular activating system wants to be right. So it is going to see more evidence that confirms that belief.
I think that for me, sometimes breaking this down to think about it about how it's impacting my children helps me
Yeah.
to then redraw the line to me as an adult, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people that it's like, okay, well, I don't know. There's this, where did this belief come from? But when I think about Henry, who is 5, and when Henry thinks that he's not enough, when he thinks that whatever he or something that he does is going to make me say, nope, that's not enough for today. Um, or even, you're not lovable. Even you could do something to make me not love you. He's going to act differently. Like, he is going to be more anxious. He is going to be more uh risk averse. He's not going to try new things. He's not going to try to learn new things because he's worried about what his actions, how that's going to impact his relationship with me. If he is spending so much time worried about how his actions are going to impact his relationship with me based on this fear that he may not be lovable, that's going to mold him into a different kind of person than if he gets to go through life with a security net and the safety of knowing, no matter what I do, my mom's still going to love me, even when I mess up, even when I take risks and it doesn't work out for me, even when I lose impulse control and kick my brother. That's not going to change that my mom doesn't love me. Are there consequences? By all means, but he is not going to have to live in fear that I'm going to come around the corner and withdraw my love from him or tell him you're not enough. You have to try harder. That, for me, the you're not enough is the voice that is often in my head. And it's so hard because I don't even know how to prevent this in him. I don't know what that looks like in a 5-year-old. It's more easy to see lovable because you see parent-child relationship and how that draws. But I think that there are still going to be times, especially as he starts kindergarten this fall, you start getting grades. Is my grade enough? Is this worthwhile? And then as a parent, you're trying to figure out, well, how do I say I know you can try harder, and I know that you're not giving it your best, while also saying what you have given is enough. Anyway, I don't know how I'll approach that one. We'll have to figure that out together. Good thing we'll still have a podcast for me to debate it and talk about it and get input from other people. But thinking about how that changes how you act in life and how you navigate life. Think about it from a kid, that if they're worried that their actions or whatever's going to happen is going to change how the people who care for them interact with them, or if you're in a situation where it's not so great and it's not safe, that it's just going to change how you are. But that still happens to us. That still happens when you are in a marriage and you make a bid for attachment and it's not returned. And that still happens when you're at work and your boss says, try again, this sucked. And you're like, "Ooh, buddy, that hit me hard." I lost my point in all of that, but I felt like giving more examples, and just that's one of the ways that I've been thinking about this is, where does this start?
Well,
For some of us.
I want to also offer. I was recently talking with somebody who's like, but I had a great childhood. My parents did love me. I don't know where this I'm not lovable came from, because
Mm.
I felt very safe and very secure with my parents. And I don't know. I think that actually she was telling me she didn't struggle with lovable and worthy, but she struggled with the am I enough? Um, is it good enough? Did I do enough? That sort of thing. So, but she, like, even talking about processing grief or processing trauma, was like, no, but I had a good childhood. And I'm like, mm-hmm. But trauma is just something that happens to you that your brain can't make sense of. So as children, there are lots of things that happen. I mean, think about when we're in like fourth and fifth grade and we pass a little note, will you go with me? Or I don't know what the kids say now, but what we used to say is, will you go with me? And I can remember my parents being like, where are you going to go? And it's like, okay, that's just what we called it. Now I think they're talking to people, whatever. But, we passed that note in fourth or fifth grade. It, and we could get wrapped up in and decide we're not lovable. It might not just be our parents. We could get moved to a new school and get rejected, and our little kid brain might have inadvertently wired up, we're not lovable. So I appreciate your, like, this is how you think about it to help you wrap your brain around it. And I also don't want people to hear, if your parents, if you've got the I'm not lovable, then your parents didn't love you. Or, because sometimes it's just weird stuff that happens that does not make any sense as an adult, that's what belief we would make. That's kind of my whole point of chapter 3 is like, cut yourself some slack. You may have decided this in the third grade, and do you really want a 10-year-old deciding how you should live your life? If not, let's just look at it and let's just test it. You know what? Here's the other thing is that on you calling BS on the hypothesis, test it. See if what I'm saying works. I should have said that a while ago. Anyway.
So the beliefs we have about ourselves, where do we go from there?
Yeah. So the very first thing I would say is that many of us have an inner critic that uses self-judgment as a motivational tool, which makes sense. Like, judgment is, making, wait, I want to read the actual definition here. Judgment is an opinion or conclusion based on available material. Okay. And so self-judgment is we are forming an opinion or forming a conclusion about ourselves based on the available material. I think this is why it's important. There's a lot of, if you're in the self-help industry, one of the big things is comparison, because oftentimes what can get us in trouble with that is like we compare the worst of ourselves to the best of someone else's. And so that's a judgment, right? And here's the thing. People will say, like, we should eliminate judgment. You should not be judgmental. Well, then stop being a human, because it actually is wired into our body to assess and to determine, is this a safe environment? Is this safe food? Is this a safe whatever? And so we are constantly scanning and forming opinions and conclusions. We have to be. That's what it means. Um,
Real quick, before all of this sort of like our, introspection in this, when I was in college, I used to deem that my home, we had a little small place off campus, and I told people they were always welcome, but this was not a no judgment zone. This was a limited judgment zone, very specifically. You'd be like, what do you mean? Why can't it be a no judgment zone? That's just so mean. And I was like, no, no, no. Limited judgment. It means that I'm going to say, wow, what a stupid decision you made, but I still love you. Like, we still are going to call each other out when we make dumb moves and we make bad decisions, but we're still going to love each other through that. And so I feel like I have been affirming that there is a form of judgment that is tolerable in some ways, that we're still going to hold each other accountable. We're still going to push each other. We're still going to be like, that was not the best move that you could have made. And that doesn't have to change that I don't love you, that I don't wish the best for you, and that I don't hope all these great things. So maybe I was like, so my limited judgment philosophy is, not trying to go anti-human behavior or nature.
100%. And funny story just popped in my brain. When I was in high school, I was out and about, and there was a bunch of us out and about, and then we were all decided to move to a different part of town. And so you just sort of jumped in. I don't even know how I got to the place we were at. I just jumped into somebody's car, and they didn't go back to town. They left town and they were headed out to the woods, which is code for those of you that live in rural America. We were going to a keg party, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so they just were going to skip the downtown and we were going to go on our way. He rolls his truck. I get thrown from the truck. I end up with whiplash. I'll give you the short story. I was a cheerleader, but my basketball coach, I had been the basketball manager the previous year. And even as a cheerleader, like on the basketball bus, the basketball coach was responsible for us. And he got up in my grill. What in the world were you doing in the truck with that person? You knew that wasn't safe. And I'm not going to say everybody's names, but it felt like what you're saying, I didn't get the sense that he was thinking poorly of me. He was trying to encourage me to treat myself better, to be safe, to do the things. Very different than if somebody's gossipy about you. I felt like when he yelled at me, I can remember that is a moment I felt very loved by the basketball coach. I know that sounds weird, but the fact that he cared enough to pull me aside and ream me out for a bad decision when I wasn't even a ball player, he didn't have any, he didn't have any actual authority over me. He had influence. He loved me and cared about me and wanted to express his judgment of my behavior. He made an assessment, he had an opinion, and he shared it with me, which I think is a beautiful way to illustrate what we're saying. Both your limited judgment and my coach is probably where I came up with this concept that I'm noodling around, of this idea of transforming our inner critic into our inner coach. It's that voice that is going to encourage us to be our best with a bedrock of love. Absolute, undeniable bedrock, solid state of love. I think the inner critic uses judgment and ridicule and shame and is not based in love. It is based in shame and
I think fear,
fear
more than anything else.
Sure. 100%. And so I love that illustration. That's a great illustration of what I'm saying about, because sometimes when you tell people we're going to replace self-judgment, and we'll get into this next, is with self-compassion, there's an element where people are like, yeah, but no, my inner critic helps drive me to success. And that's what keeps me motivated. It's like, right, but what's the base level of motivation? Is the base level fear and shame, or is the base level motivation love?
So in addition, though, I think one of the things that impacts us in general with self-judgment is the way that we judge others is often the way that we judge ourselves, or vice versa. There are times where you might be talking about, even I think about, like, I think it's very obvious. Think about teenage girls talking about their bodies and being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so fat. I need to lose all this weight. Like, look at me." And it's the teeny skinny friend standing next to their larger friend, and the skinny friend is saying, "Look how fat I am." And that comment about yourself detracts from the relationship you have with others. I think this is like just a really obvious example, but there are other ones that are more subtle. So when you insult yourself and make that okay, that is also making it okay for you to insult others. And when you insult others, the same thing applies to yourself. Uh, Kind of an interesting example about this was that recently Angela and I were talking about, I was really proud of the number of books I read in 2023. It was the most books I have ever read in a single year. And then Angela, your first response was, "Well, if you count fiction, then I guess me too." And I was like, "What the crap do you mean if you count fiction? That's like all of my books. Like, if I don't count fiction, I've got like 3." And like, well, I mean, I guess sort of, kind of. If you count this whole category of books, then I guess I read a lot.
I
And it
was
was like,
totally talking about myself too.
exactly. And that's the thing, that sometimes that judgment that you put on yourself can impact your relationship with others. Because I was over here feeling proud that I read 27 books in a year. And then, like, with just such a casual, not even realizing, no intention behind it at all, that could have impacted our relationship in such a way to be like, wow, she doesn't even think that my accomplishment matters that much. I say could have because we
You actually
laughed
called me
about
out
it.
pretty it was pretty funny. And I was very glad you called me out on it right away, because I totally had missed it. I was all in my own head trying to figure out how many books I had read.
Mhm.
And so I feel like I want to defend myself, because I have been judging myself for the last 2 months. I have been well, for the last 2 months of 2023, I had a lot going on. I spent a lot of time in hospice and hospital situations. And so I read like just lightweight, sweet Christian romance fiction, like 120 pages at a time, 150 pages. They were super just sweet little stories. And there were times when I didn't feel motivated to work. I was wrestling with grief, and I used it for escape. And I didn't like how much I used it for escape. I liked a little bit, but I didn't like the extra. I was definitely like, I definitely had replaced emotional eating and emotional drinking, because I wasn't drinking during that time frame, with emotional reading and just escapism. And so I was absolutely 1000% judging myself, because it wasn't an accomplishment for me. It was an escape from work, even some of the time.
Well, and what's
So I
interesting
love that you
though,
make this point, because it really did then heighten my awareness to be like, okay, all right, we got
yeah,
something to
if
work on.
well, and if fiction doesn't count for you, then who does it get to count for?
Right. Which was not at all what I was not trying to send that message. I was definitely all caught up in my own self. So I really appreciated that you brought it out, because it was
Yeah.
absolutely a great example of that, because
Well, where our
I
self-judgment and the
yeah.
relationship we have with our self can impact the relationship we have with others.
Well, and not only that, but like when we were all talking about the book thing, uh your dad and I were defending you because you had read like much larger books. So even though you read 27 books, if you looked at the number of pages that were in your books, then I mean it was easily like 50 of the books I was reading, you know? And so you were like, oh, other people were reading 100 and you were discounting yourself. And here we are defending you. And then I was inadvertently putting stuff on you when I wasn't trying to. I
Yeah.
was trying to defend you and crap on myself, should on myself, you know? So anyway, it's a beautiful example because it has very little consequences, you know,
Right.
like talking about our reading. So great example. Thank you for pulling that out.
Well, and I think that even for me, part of where, just to give some context, even where I was feeling that you guys were defending me, is that I have a lot of friends. I joined a book club this past year, and I have a lot of friends who who hit 100 books in the year, which felt like my 27 was fairly nothing. And their 100 books are the same size as the 27 that I've been reading. Anyway, it's just different. And so it's hard. So I was judging myself that I didn't read enough. I want to go back to the point you made, though. You weren't emotional eating and you weren't emotionally drinking, but you were still uh, indulging in escapism. We've mentioned it before, and this is super side tangent from what this episode is about, but coping mechanisms are not innately bad. They help you to cope with that moment. And finding a coping strategy that is not destructive to yourself, to your relationship with others, that can help you get through some of those harder moments, I'm still going to stand by this. I don't think it's all bad. I think
No,
that
it's
there is
not.
balance and there is things to
100%.
be
No.
like, it can be like okay, cool, interesting to note that I needed to lean on escapism during this time while I'm sitting next to somebody who's dying. I wonder why I need some escapism right now. Like, you know what I mean? There's some part of it that, like, there are way more destructive things than to read 100 Christian romance novels. Like, I don't know. Of all the things that you could do, like, oh man, really a lot of judgment needed for yourself because you read a bunch of fiction. It's I think the coping skill is okay to acknowledge and say, I survived. I did what I needed to do to survive.
Yes, and just like emotions are an indicator light, this is simply an indicator, right? And
Mhm.
so and that's what I looked at it. You know, even the conversation we had where I was like, well, if fiction count, like that whole thing was so illuminating for me to go, oh, okay. Here's something that I might need to cut myself some slack. I've compared to 3 years ago, I absolutely do a great job of cutting myself slack. And oh, look, you can always be better, even at being kind to yourself, even at being compassionate to yourself, even at being right. And so I'm still on the journey. And it was beautiful because it was not a super painful way
Yeah.
to notice, oh, wow, here's this very innocuous conversation that gave me this really interesting um, information about what was going on with me. The other thing is that ended up actually leading to me, like, my catchphrase for the year. I know everybody picks one word. This is I choose not to choose this as my one word because it feels like I'm embracing mediocrity, but I'm not. It's okay to be okay. It's okay to be okay. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this feels so weird unless you know that I've spent a good chunk of my life in trauma and a good chunk of my life with a very activated nervous system. And now, when my nervous system is somewhat calm, then I freak out a little bit and be like, what's going to happen? Is the other shoe going to drop? Oh my gosh. Now, enjoy this because it could get bad. And so, like, I literally have one post-it note on my keyboard, on my computer monitor that says, what if it's simple? What if it was easy? Because I'm having to, like, literally reprogram my brain to be okay that I chose to read some sweet Christian fiction as a way to cope. Like, why I want to celebrate that I've upgraded to such a better coping mechanism. Because what do we say? Is it serving me? Actually, yes, because there have been I've had some conversations where I'll be like, my sweet husband will let me tell him about the books and like, oh, that's so fun. Look at this. Anyway, and so
Well, and I just want to give this the smallest reassurance. even if you aren't reading, we keep saying sweet Christian fiction.
Whatever.
I'm reading the opposite of that kind of fiction. I just want to clarify. Some of my fiction is not that. It's like dark fantasy trauma, world's exploding. What are we going to do about it? Or something like that fiction. So I just want to clarify, it doesn't have to be the type of fiction. Engaging in reading can be the thing.
Sorry, I got judgment because I like people that tell me all about watching horror movies all the time and then they can't figure out why they battle fear so bad. And I'm like, this is not related to beliefs. This is like what you put in your brain, you come out. So anyway, I'm
just reading about like a magical world where like the king wants to take everybody down, and how are we going to thwart the king, and
just
obstacles come up in the way. It's like, just different things.
It's fine.
So when we judge ourselves, we sometimes inadvertently judge other people.
I'm going to take it one step further. That was your point. My hypothesis is that you judge people to the same level you judge yourself. Because I can tell you that when my inner critic was ruling the brain power all the time, the crap that I said to myself, I judged everybody by a similar standard. I used to have to work really hard to try not to judge my husband. I mean, really hard. And I have seen a direct impact in the less I judge myself, the less I judge him. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I don't have to think about as much how I'm treating him and how I'm judging him, because I have so much more capacity of self-compassion. And when you have self-compassion, which says, whew, I'm a human, I'm having a whole human experience, and that becomes your muscle memory, then when someone else does something that is a bonehead, knucklehead thing to do, you so much more likely to grab hold of, okay, they're having a human experience as well. I can have love. I can have acceptance. That we're going to, in a little while, talk about boundaries, but that doesn't mean I'm going to let him treat me terribly. As a matter of fact, I don't let people treat me badly. The more I love myself, the more I'm like, no, 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 because I don't now beat myself up. If I'm beating myself up, then what other people say, I'm like, nothing compared to the crap I say to myself, and so you do end up like, you don't tolerate people treating you badly, and it's easier for you to treat other people better because you're treating yourself better.
I have a lot of friends who I think get caught in this like incongruent space where what they say to themselves is very different than what they would say out loud to other people. Like I have a friend who would never tell me that I'm not enough, who would never tell me that I'm a bad mom, who would never discourage me in that kind of way, but she would 100% say it to herself. And sometimes that can be an interruption mechanism, is to say, would I say this to my best friend? This thing that my brain is telling me, would I be okay if I said this to my best friend? How would I react if another person said this to my best friend in front of me? Like, I would get angry sometimes. I would get up in arms and be like, oh, heck no. Like, Mama Bear's coming to fight. Somebody hold my hoops. Like, do not say these things about my friend. And yet, when we say it to ourselves, you're not getting up in arms. And the call to action today is to get up in arms when you start treating yourself this way. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. We're not going to be okay treating ourselves poorly, because we do deserve better. And we're going to start to take conscious steps. It's a slow process. It's not an overnight. We're going to take steps to be on purpose about treating ourselves with more compassion and less judgment. In the year of the Barbie and Taylor Swift, we are all going to be here for ourselves. All the things.
Yes. And if you want to change very slowly, change your actions. If you want to change quickly, change your beliefs. And that's why I started this whole hypothesis with you have to get back to your core beliefs. It is the drum I will beat forever. You have to resolve some of those incomplete emotional loops that are related to these core beliefs. And most people can't do that on their own. And I'm just going to encourage you guys that both Sammy and I are coaches and will coach you through the process of resetting those beliefs. So if you read through the book and you get to chapter 6 and you're like, this is overwhelming, I don't even know if I can do this, know that you have a resource. First call is free. Reach out to us and we can help you reset your beliefs so that you can begin to have less self-judgment, more self-compassion, and the ability to not even have to think about it. Because I'm telling you, conscious thought and choosing a new thought and choosing how to treat yourself and all of those things are take a lot of conscious effort. And if you will fix your unconscious beliefs, it will reduce the amount of effort that you have to do. You will have to practice the new beliefs. I'm not saying that, but you absolutely, if you will reset these beliefs, then it will put you in a much better trajectory to have a better relationship with yourself and get you on the way to be freaking awesome.
I love it. Angela, I feel like that is just a really good spot for us to sort of wrap up the conversation. That was a really good bow to put on it. And know that we are here for you. We are rooting for you every step of the way. And even if you are sitting there listening to this and you feel like, well, I'm all alone in it, we are here with you. We are rooting through you, through the microphones, to your headphones, through your screen, whatever it might be. We love you. You are enough. You are worthy and valuable. You have what it takes, and you can trust yourself. I hope you guys go have a great rest of your day and go be freaking awesome.